Hello and welcome back to the Alnwick Castle podcast. I'm Deborah Beecroft.
And I'm Daniel Watkins.
And in today's episode, we're going back to the Tudor period to find out about Tudor music.
We spoke to the Tudor Songbook singer Jay Britton, who performs at castles, palaces and great houses across the UK. She told us about the importance of music for the Tudors, her own favourite pieces to sing, the costumes she wears, and much more.
We recorded with Jay after she appeared here at Alnwick Castle for our 2023 Tudor weekend. Here is our conversation. It took place in the castle guest hall, so you might find it slightly echoey in places. Please enjoy. We're very pleased to welcome Jay Britton, the Tudor Songbook, to Alnwick Castle. And today we've also been joined by Karina, one of our artisans, who, as a Tudor enthusiast, is joining this chat to ask some questions herself. So welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you. I'm very well, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here this weekend.
Brilliant. Now, the first thing that a lot of our visitors want to know, as well as ourselves on the podcast, is how did you end up becoming a Tudor singer?
Well, I've loved the Tudors from day one. I grew up in southeast London. I grew up in Eltham, so the nursery palace of Henry VIII is there. I'm not far on the train from the Tower of London, from Hampton Court, so I've grown up around the history, from Greenwich as well. And my career has always been singing since the age of 18. I worked my way through university, working professionally as a singer, singing at events, singing at concerts. And history is always something that I've just kept my private study with, so I've been reading books about histories. I love the documentaries. You had Tracy Borman here last night, and watching her TV programmes and her books is always something that I've really enjoyed. And then just the penny dropped a couple of years ago that I could combine the two things that I really love. I could combine my singing and my training in that, because I did train as a classical singer at university, and put myself in a Tudor costume and sing music from the Tudor period, because it's something, the immersive side of history is something that I'm really, really passionate about. I love it when I go to historic venues with my own children, and even before I had children, and you see people in costumes, you see them doing things, and it just adds another layer to the experience when you're visiting somewhere. And that's something that I like to bring my own flair to with the music.
So what we're hearing is that you liked the time period, the Tudor time period, before the actual music style itself. So did you then fall in love with the music after that, or did it kind of come together?
I did, yeah. I completely fell in love with the music. I was thinking, how much music is there going to be? Is there going to be a lot of it? My goodness, there is loads. And not just vocal music, there's a lot of instrumental music. Henry VIII himself wrote music for consorts. And there's lots of different types of music as well. You've got the music that they would have had in their privy apartments, so smaller scale music, and then larger scale music with louder, harsher instruments, your kind of sackbuts and your cornets and the percussion that you'd have had in banquets and feasts and special occasions. And then you've got the choral music, the sacred music that would have been used for acts of worship.
And one of the things that you mentioned when you've been performing here at the castle is that image of Henry VIII, not as the big arms across his hips tyrant, but as a musician and a composer and someone who wrote songs. Can you tell us a little bit about the Henry VIII composed pieces that you sing?
Yes, absolutely. Like you just said, we've said a couple of times today to the audiences that we tend to have this image in our head of Henry VIII as a tyrant, the later in life Henry VIII. But actually, as a young man, he was slim and athletic and handsome and the envy of Christendom. He was a poet and he composed music. He composed music in all kinds of ways. He composed music to be performed privately between him and his courtiers. And that was a pastime that lots of noble men and women would have had. It was a courtly virtue for women as well to be able to perform music amongst themselves. And some of the music that I've been singing while I've been here this weekend has been composed by Henry VIII. And it can be performed in many ways. I'm singing them today as solos over the course of this weekend. But you often hear them performed without any singers at all, just in consorts, and you hear them performed just by the lute. And we have a very fine lutenist here. We've got Fabio Fernandes. And actually, I think we were going to hear a little extract of one of Henry VIII's songs. This song is called Hélas Madame. The lute is an instrument that Henry was noted to have been quite proficient at playing as well. So this is the sound that you would have heard in the privy apartments while Henry VIII was on the throne.
So Fabio, the lute, how similar is it to like a more modern day guitar or an instrument someone might play today?
It's quite different. I mean, I think the only similar thing is you play it with your hands, and it kind of sits and move them. So you need a bit of dexterity and coordination. That's similar, but everything else is different. The tuning is different. The amount of strings is different. The technique is very, very different. So I started studying the guitar in London, and part of the second year of studies, you have to learn the theorbo. It's basically a bass version of the lute, really, really long. And in my third year, I really liked the lute sound and the songs, and I asked my teacher, that was a theorbo and he is a theorbo and lute expert, if he could teach me the lute. He was very excited, and he said yes. And since then, we started learning these wonderful instruments. But yeah, lots of things are very different. Mainly just the fact that you play with your hands.
So you mentioned in terms of music, it was in courts, it was in religious places of worship, but were there other people who would play music? What other forms of music would there have been at that period of time, and how would people have experienced that as an audience member or within crowds or something like that?
I think much like today, it depends very much on the situation. So in our modern day lives, when we want to improve a situation, any kind of event, any kind of occasion, we add some music to it. It just elevates it slightly, doesn't it? So for acts of worship at the time, there would have been the choir of the Chapel Royal, and they would have been singing the daily services, the masses that they would have attended daily. And the same for things like weddings and funerals, they would have performed music for that. And there would have been the consort, the musicians, the instrumentalists associated with them as well. And the Chapel Royal were also responsible for performing in the masques, the secular performances that would have happened as court entertainment. And the scale of this would just depend on the scale of the occasion. So you could expect to hear a huge amount of music with a huge amount of musicians at occasions like Christmas and Easter. Not Lent, Easter, because Lent, everything was absolutely stripped back. You weren't allowed to eat meat unless you had a license during Lent. But come Easter, it's a huge celebration. It's the biggest celebration of the Roman Catholic or the Christian calendar. And the same with Christmas. It's a huge time of feasting. The 12 days of Christmas was 12 days of continuous Tudor partying. And if you want to have a party, you've got to have music. And Henry brought over a family called the Bassanos from Italy, or from Venice, a very, very famous family of instrument makers, and they were housed at the Charterhouse, and they lasted at the Charterhouse all the way through to the reign of Elizabeth I.
So these are the sorts of songs that you're performing here at the castle and around the country, but they're the songs that 500 years ago, the residents of the castle, the Earl of Northumberland, the Countess of Northumberland, they would have heard, especially when they went to the royal palaces attending the king or the queen.
Yes, absolutely. In various forms, they might have been sung by one voice, they might have been sung by a choir or a small group of voices, or they might have been played by instruments. But in various forms, it's like anything, you use the forces that you've got. So if you were going to a big celebration, a lot of money would have been put into that, and there's this kind of misconception that like anyone would have just been playing. No, the music for the royal courts would have been of incredibly high standard.
And would it have been new pieces of music for specific events or coronations, parties? Would they have been written specifically for that, or was it music that had been...
Yes, that would absolutely happen, but there was also a real lean towards the traditional music, especially religious music, liturgical music that was being used as part of an act of worship. There were strong traditions surrounding that. As you move through the Tudor monarchs, the style of the music needs to change because the religion of the country was changing. And by the time you get to the reign of Elizabeth I, there's composers like Tallis and like Byrd, and in fact Tallis lasted through the reigns of Henry VIII, Edward VI, Lady Jane Grey, Mary I and Elizabeth I, and despite being a known Catholic, was composing and an absolute favourite of Elizabeth I's, and they were composing new pieces all the way through that period.
So the music from 500 years ago that we're talking about, was it written down? Was it remembered through people singing it this whole time? And if it is written down, is it written down how we write music today?
Yes, it was absolutely written down. And the notation, whilst it bears quite a lot of similarity to the modern day musical notation, there are lots of differences, and it's slightly difficult to read. I do look at original manuscripts, but I do tend to work from modern arrangements of them. And I know that's similar for the lute music as well. Some of the early lute music just looks bonkers when it's written down in its early forms. But like anything, musical notation has evolved. It's evolved from being a slight kind of stripe on a page to this incredibly complex series of kind of dots and dashes that we have today. And it will keep continuously evolving as well. It's just the nature of everything. But the people at the time, there was a standardised notation that they were using. But some key differences are that if we have a song in parts today, all 4 parts are written down so that you can read it as one line. If you have a song in 4 parts in the Tudor times, they would have the first part written out in entirety, and then on another section of the page, they'd have another part written out in its entirety. So each player would be given their own part, which for singers is very different to what we have today, but actually for instrumentalists you are usually just given your part. And with regards to the language, yes, it's so different. And deciphering medieval and Tudor, like early modern handwriting is so hard, and something that I'm trying to learn about because it's something I want to get better at in terms of being able to interpret texts for myself rather than relying on what other people have done. There wasn't standardised spelling. Some of the words that we don't have today in our vocabulary. It's not so difficult with English, but when you're then going back and looking at French texts, I'm not a native French speaker. French is a struggle anyway. So then when you're then looking at Old French with no standardised spelling, the possibilities seem endless. But it is something that I think all performers are willing to learn. And if new research comes out on it, it's very interesting to hear.
And how good are you at understanding Old English?
I'm getting better at it. It's one of those things that the longer you immerse yourself in something, the more familiar it becomes. There's some things that are just second nature now, but there's other things that I'm looking at thinking, what on earth does that mean? But then you go on a little kind of Google journey. And it's amazing the things that you can find out. It really is.
Should we hear a little bit more music?
I think that would be lovely.
Past times of youth, sometime among, none can say, but necessary. I hurt no man, I do no wrong. I left where I do marry, no some safe that you've ruled me.
Thank you, that was beautiful. Is that one of your favourite pieces to perform, or what are your favourite pieces that you like to play, particularly in venues of historical nature?
That is one of my favourite ones to perform. Firstly, because it fits my voice quite nicely. It sits in a place that's quite comfortable in my range. And secondly, it's another one of the songs that's been attributed to King Henry VIII. And I just think it's fascinating that such an iconic historical figure was responsible for writing music that is still very, very accessible to modern ears.
And speaking of historical figures, the dresses that you've worn at Alnwick Castle have all been for Anne Boleyn.
Yes.
How important was music to Anne? Was she a writer herself, or was she more of a performer?
She absolutely did perform music. It was a courtly virtue. Ladies of noble birth were encouraged and given training in things like dance and music because it would help them have good marriages. We know that Anne Boleyn had a beautiful voice because one of the European ambassadors told us so. He described her as having a voice like a siren, which I always think is a slightly cutting remark because, of course, a siren, for anyone who's familiar with mythology, is the mermaid-type creature that lures men to their demise with their beautiful song. But at least the song's beautiful. And she also conveniently left behind a book of music. None of the music in the book is attributed to have been composed by her, but it was her anthology, a bit like a 1520s mixtape, because she liked these songs enough to have them scribed into one book for her. And we know it belongs to her because she signed it. She signed it Mistress Anne Boleyn, now thus, and now thus being her family's motto. And she styles herself as Mistress, not Anne the Queen, not Anne, Marquess of Pembroke, Mistress Anne Boleyn. So it dates it before 1533 when she would have become Queen Anne Boleyn.
I've mentioned sort of that you're performing obviously at Alnwick Castle. Do you enjoy performing at historic properties, and what is it about them in particular that suits, not obviously Tudor music, but what is it about them that helps you get into character and understand the music and as you're performing?
I absolutely love performing in historic venues. I genuinely do love it. I think for me, it adds another layer of immersion to what I'm doing. If I'm trying to channel any kind of character, be it Anne Boleyn this weekend or generic royal or noble Tudor lady performing music, to actually be in the space where something like that would have happened is a real privilege. And it's quite a unique way for me to experience these venues as well. And quite often the rooms that I'd be performing in at various castles and historic houses around the UK, the rooms that I'm singing in would have been the rooms where the music would have been performed. Mm-hmm. And that's lovely as well, because then you're getting the benefits of the acoustic in a similar way that they would have been heard then.
And this weekend you have been dressed as Anne Boleyn.
I have, yes.
We are on a podcast, so people can't see the costume that you've got on as you're speaking to us, but could you talk us through some of the outfits that you wear while you are performing in Tudor? Because they're quite impressive.
They're glorious costumes. I can't take any credit for the costumes. They're made by the Tudor Dreams historical costumier, who is an incredibly talented dressmaker. And they're not a theatrical costume. It's not a zip up the back kind of job of this. They are, for all intents and purposes, historically accurate garments, and they comprise of several layers. So we start off with body linen, a white shift dress. I'm trying to show people in the room with us. It's barely peeking out over the top of my garment there. And that's what the ladies would have used. That's their undergarment. And it's what they would have sweat into, and it's that would have been changed sometimes up to several times a day in really hot weather. And when you think about the amount of time that goes into dressing a Tudor lady, as you're about to hear, that's no mean feat. But you would have had servants. If you were a lady of high enough station to be wearing these kind of clothes, you'd have had servants to do this for you. So it's no big deal for you. It's just for them. So after your shift dress, you have a petticoat, and that's a U-fronted petticoat. So it doesn't add any bulk to your waist section. And it just adds a little bit of warmth because, as we all know, castles can be very cold places, especially in the winter. Perhaps not today, but in the winter they can be incredibly drafty, and they didn't have the benefits of the electric heaters that we now have. And the petticoats are often red, and the reason they're red is because the Tudors believed that the colour red would help keep you warm. After which I've got a bum roll, which is like a big sausage-shaped thing that is tied around my waist. It's flat at the front but adds bulk at the back. And after that comes the kirtle, which is a sleeveless dress. And that's the embellishments, the beading at the top of that dress on show. And that's often made of a brocade-style fabric, printed various patterns. The one I'm wearing now is purple and gold, and of course purple was reserved just for royalty. But the one that I've been wearing for much of this weekend has been a replica of the portrait that hangs in the National Portrait Gallery in London. So it has the pearls and the gold embellishments on it. And after that kirtle comes an overgown, which is like, it goes on like a coat. It's got your sleeves, and it pulls round, and then it's open at the front to reveal the material of the kirtle underneath. The overgowns that I wear are often velvet. This one that I'm wearing here has got shorter sleeves, or no fur on the sleeves. This one has got slimmer sleeves, but the one that I was wearing earlier this weekend has got beautifully long turned back fur sleeves that I think are quite iconically Tudor. And then underneath those, you've then got the addition of detachable fore sleeves that adds another layer of decoration. And that overgown is laced up at the front with another corset. So your kirtle is corseted at the side and it's boned, and your overgown is boned and then it's laced up at the front as well. So you are pulled in and then you are pulled in again. And then there's a placard, so a kind of triangular piece of material that then gets pinned in the front. And it might seem a bit, well, they're royal, why are they having to pin their clothes like they're broken or something? No, that's how they did it. And they also used to use pins to pin the shoulders of the kirtle to the overgown to make the look more neat. And that's where the term pin money comes from, where the husbands would give their wives money for pins to help pin their clothes. And then, of course, we've got headdress, because no respectable Tudor lady would be seen with their hair uncovered. And in fact, the French hood that Anne Boleyn is famous for wearing was scandalous almost at the time, because it showed quite a lot of the front of the hair rather than the very boxy gable hood that had been fashionable previously.
So you're well and truly in full attire, but what about what you wear on your feet in this instance? So obviously you could be comfortable, or if you're going full whack, full into character, do you have anything on your feet that's specific to the time period?
I'm actually wearing Tudor style shoes. They are
Amazing.
Very square at the toe, very thin at the bottom. They're not the most beautiful, not the most flattering to our modern eyes, but it's similar to what they'd have worn.
There was once an actress, and you'll have to figure out who this was, who said you're never in full character unless you're in the right shoes. So clearly you take it seriously.
I think that's true. Yeah, you want to be as fully in character as possible. Yeah. But I would like to keep my head, please.
And how many outfits do you have?
I think it's about 13 now. Wow. They're not all Tudor. I've got Tudor and a couple of Elizabethan as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you perform more often as Tudor period, or do you have as much as Elizabethan performances?
It's a real mix of both, and sometimes I will go to places where I'm performing Tudor one day and Elizabethan the next, or if I'm doing a concert, it'll be Tudor in one half and Elizabethan in another half. So it can really vary, and I love both equally as well. They're very, very different in their styles, the clothes and the music, but they're equally beautiful.
This might be an easy question, or it might be a more tricky one. What is your favourite thing about the Tudor period?
That's a really hard question. My favourite thing, because there's loads of things that I love.
Yeah.
But to pick one thing.
Or maybe a fact that you like about the Tudors.
I think my favourite fact is that the young Henry VIII was not the tyrant that the old Henry VIII was. And that to discover that he is more than the image of the terrifying looking portrait that I can imagine would strike fear into the hearts of anyone who looked at it at the time. I think to discover that he was a humanist, he was a poet and he was a musician, and he was a chivalrous knight at the start of his youth. I think that's probably my favourite fact. But the thing that's beautiful about the Tudor period is that everything is amazing. It's the point in history where clothing is becoming propaganda. The music was being brought in from the European courts so that Henry VIII wanted to build a court that would rival every other court there was. He was constantly trying to outdo Francis I. Everything was the bigger, the better. How many jewels can we have on this outfit? How many dishes can we have in this banquet? That's a nice castle. Let's make it out of sugar as part of our celebrations. Everything was just so extra, and I think that's why I love it.
So I've probably got a question for Fabio about what it's like playing the lute in the 21st century. Do you feel any kind of connection playing this music that the likes of Henry VIII would have heard, especially when Jay's singing it along with you? Can you feel the historical significance of what you're doing, or is music just music to you?
I think so, actually. I mean, pretty much all of the repertoire for the instrument is from that period, right? Or old enough. So every time you listen to the lute, or every time I was listening to the lute, and all the music I heard before I even started learning was from that period, Elizabethan period, to Tudor period. And it creates a strong connection between the sounds, the plucked sound, the string sound that the lute has, to the musical style. All the ornamentation, cadences is very, very characteristic of that period, and is clearly very different from all the Spanish sounds from the modern guitar. So yeah, I think so. Strong influences, and every time I think of the lutes, I think of that light beauty in lute playing and ornamentation and accompaniments that existed in that period. There is, of course, some modern compositions. Most recently, people have been exploring a bit more this repertoire. There's some jazz crossovers. That's quite exciting. But I think, at least for me, it's still very, very connected with Tudor period, yes.
I just want to say that your talent and how you've put it to use, I find it extremely important, and I feel grateful that I've heard you. I mean, today I came in to watch you, and then I just thought, wow, you're immersing people in an experience that they may never get again. And I actually I was transported back to the Tudor period, and I just want to thank you for that, because I think you are doing good work in putting your talent to such good use, because it's important that we keep history alive. I learnt more than I ever did about the Tudors at school from your half-an-hour performance today.
Oh, thank you so much. That's an incredible compliment. Thank you. And honestly, I think keeping history alive is something that is so important. But in terms of being music specific here, if you want to learn something about people and society at a certain time, looking at the music and looking at the artwork is a really good place to start, because as well as the facts, you're actually getting kind of little double meanings, and they've got as much colour and detail in them as the most vibrant tapestries on the walls of Hampton Court, and it's there if you want to look for it. In terms of the audiences, it's lovely, and one thing that I'm always really, really keen on is making it accessible to young children. And I think sometimes people are a bit anxious, thinking, oh, I'm not going to bring the children into this because they're not going to sit still. They might move around. They might want a bag of crisps. I don't care. That's fine. They can have a bag of crisps. If it rustles, it rustles. Because you never know, 5 minutes of listening to something can make an impression on your child. Mm-hmm. And they're our future historians. They're our future musicians. And I think it's important that they are welcomed into performance situations where it is appropriate to do so like this.
And I imagine when these pieces of music were being performed 500 years ago, people weren't just sitting watching, they would have been up and about.
Oh no, exactly, lots of dancing.
Yeah.
And
like you say, I think it's important that they just get that, even if it's a couple of minutes, that's something that they would never have heard before, but then they might come back and think, actually, I don't know what that is. And there was a couple of children, particularly yesterday, who came back and forward to see you because they sort of were in love with the dress or heard the music and just wanted that little bit more to it. And I suppose performing places like this makes that something that can be done.
Exactly that. And when it's these short performances, I think it's incredibly accessible for children, whereas you might not feel it appropriate to bring small children to a full-length evening performance where people have bought a ticket for that performance. You probably don't want to hear someone rustling a bag of crisps. But when you're on a day out somewhere like this, it's fine. It's beautiful, and the sound of children isn't something that we should be discouraging. Mostly.
And if people would like to know more about you, where can they find?
You can find me on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, or X as we now call it, as the Tudor Songbook.
Shall we be played out with one more piece of music, do you think?
Should we do Pastime with Good Company?
Oh, I like that one.
So this is Pastime with Good Company, with Jay on vocals, Fabio on the lute, and Karina as special guest drummer.
Could we do bum, 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 bum? Yeah. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah.
Pastime with good company, I love and shall until I die. Gratulous, but none deny. So God be pleased us live will I. For my pastimes, hunt, sing and dance, my heart is set, all goodly sport. For my comfort, who shall he let?
That was so much fun.
Well, thank you very much, Jay, Fabio, and Karina on the drum, I suppose.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We hope you enjoyed finding out a little bit more about Tudor music with Jay and the Tudor Songbook. If you'd like to hear more about historical music, please go back and listen to episode 40 of the podcast, which was all about music in the medieval period.
And keep an eye on Alnwick Castle's social media channels for announcement for our future events inspired by the Tudors.
If you've got any questions about Alnwick Castle you'd like answered by us, our 50th episode is coming up and will be a listener's questions special, so please send them in by emailing podcast@alnwickcastle.com.
We'll be back in 2 weeks with a look at another part of history connected to Alnwick Castle. Until then, I've been Deborah.
And I've been Daniel.
Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
Bye.